Hello and welcome to a very special edition of the Jay Duke Show. This show is all about the people and all about the horses, of course, that are involved with those people. And today's show with Equestrian Canada, the president from Chris Sorensen from EC is coming on. And this is all about you, all about your questions, all about your concerns. And we're going to get you as many answers as possible to help you, figure out what are you doing moving forward here in 2021. The situation has been very challenging with the pandemic that's happened. There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of concerns that people have with their hobby, with their business, with their industry. And it's so great that Chris Sorensen is coming on the show today to answer your questions, to answer my questions. It's a tough one. EC is under fire, no question about it. And we're here to bring light to those questions, bring light to the problems, and we're here to find solutions for you and to make everything about your equestrian endeavor as positive as we possibly can. So thank you so much for tuning into the Jay Duke Show on Horse Network. Today's show is brought to you by Equishopper, and Equishopper is an absolutely fantastic site. You have to check them out. They have amazing products, an amazing marketplace, an amazing community. And really that's what we need to, we're going to be talking about that today on the show, about creating a better community, creating a positive community, and Equishopper is that site for you. So please check out equishopper.com for everything you need with a horse. You're going to find there. It's a really, really cool site. So check them out, please. I'm going to bring on my guest, and that is Chris Sorensen. Chris has represented Canada on 4 different continents worldwide in Nations Cup competitions. He's very experienced in the equestrian world. He's well known in show jumping, all over the world for what he's done for Canada. He also has family involvement in driving, endurance, ownership of high performance horses. He was born in Calgary. He's lived on the East Coast. He's been all over the world. So a top equestrian joining us with lots of experience. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much. Well, we've been looking forward to this one for a long time. You and I talked a couple months ago about doing it, and it's taken a lot of work to put it together, and it's a big one. There's so much interest in this, and I really appreciate you taking the time to answer. I've taken in hundreds of questions in the past few weeks from members online, and we're going to try to get to as many of those as possible. And for those of you that are watching, please send in your questions. We're going to get to everyone that we possibly can. We can't promise that we'll get to all of them, but as many as we can get to, we certainly will. So please send in your questions, whether you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube Live. So Chris, let's start off. You've been involved with Equestrian Canada for approximately 4 years. You've been a member of the board of directors, and now you're currently the president. That makes you one of the longest tenured people at Equestrian Canada, as there's been quite a bit of turnover. What are you hoping to accomplish as president?
Well, I ended up president. We've as you said, had some turnover with the CEOs, and we're making progress with the CEOs. Our last CEO was recruited, fortunately, instead of losing them. So it was a matter of us wanting to keep consistency that Meg stepped into the role. And the board is really confident in the direction that the organization is going. We got a long road ahead of us, but we're confident in the direction that we're building. And Eve built an extremely strong team in the office that was just starting to get their legs underneath them. So between having the ability to stay the course with the strategic planning and with the budgeting that the board has done. When we came in, there was yearly strategic planning, yearly budgeting. Now we're working on our 2028 vision. That'll go out for consultation with the community in June. And we have a 5-year budget starting to figure out how we're going to make sure we move along that strategic plan. So as the board and as the president, the goal is really to make sure that we can stay the course with what we're planning. And the main objectives in that are creating value for our end user, creating value for the participants. We need to explain the value that we deliver better than we have, and we need to massively increase the value for what they're getting. And the sport is in decline, so we're looking to grow it. So my main goal as the president is to support Meg and the operations team and make sure that we as the board look at the strategic level of the operations and we're really staying at 30,000 feet so the operations team can really deliver what we're looking for. So my goal as president is to support the organization and get to those kind of outcomes where everybody thinks it was really worthwhile to be part of EC.
So you've had several CEOs in the past 5 years, 4 CEOs in the past 5 years, and now Meg Kruger is in that position. Why is she going to last? It seems to be a revolving door there, and why is there so much turnover and lack of direction at the top?
I think it's a fantastic question. I was going to add before, I'm certainly not the longest serving because we've got some fantastic volunteers that have been around for years. I'm kind of a newbie, but in terms of our turnover, it's not just at the CEO level, it's also at our employees, it's in our volunteers and all of that kind of stuff. We need to make sure that people are enjoying working for EC. I think what's going to give Meg a real shot is traditionally we've kind of yo-yoed between equestrian CEOs that don't necessarily know how to run a 30-person operation in an office setting, or they're not used to interacting with the government, whether it be Sport Canada or Ag Canada. So it's a very diverse skill set. And when we started doing a CEO search, you can really see that we're not paying enough to attract the kind of talent that we want. And the organization is extremely complex. We get great volunteers and everybody's got great ideas, but we maybe are not moving fast enough for some of those people. Other people really like the way it's been historically. So to build consensus is very difficult. So what we're trying to do is really face the history. The reality is that EC has been in decline. That is what we inherited when we came on the board. There was 3 board members left. There was no CEO in place. And the question is not what happened or who's to blame. It's, okay, here's what we've inherited. What are we going to do about it? And that's the mentality of the board of directors. That's the mentality of Meg. I think she's incredibly dedicated, and she's got a board of directors that's behind her and is trying to create an organization and create the buy-in that it'll take for anybody to succeed at any level of the organization. And I think COVID's only accelerated that obvious need for change. And I think that creates actually a big opportunity coming out of this, that we really see the need for change. And we're going to change the organization fundamentally to ensure that we can deliver what Meg needs to succeed, what the whole organization needs to succeed.
So, in equestrian, there's so many different levels of the sport. You have, the riders that go to, 1 horse show a year or less. You have, the people that do, some beginner lessons, once a week or twice a month type of thing, all the way up to the Olympic level, and everything in between. So that's a huge variety of interests that a federation like yours has to cover. And let's take the average equestrian in Canada. Maybe they go to 4 horse shows a year type of thing. They stay within their province, whatever province that may be. What is the benefit to them of being a member of Equestrian Canada? How does their membership make their horse experience better?
Well, I think that's a great question. The average equestrian in Canada I would say, is hard to define. There's about 900,000 horses in the country. Collectively, according to our numbers, I think PTSOs, all the provinces collectively have contact with about 90,000 of them. So about 10% of horse owners. And EC, you have to be a provincial member to be an EC member. So EC lies on top of that. So you're absolutely right. We need to grow the grassroots. That's absolutely critical. But actually, we see at a lot of riding schools across the country, we hear that they've got waiting lists. So the sport is actually highly attractive, and it's very COVID friendly from a social distancing point of view. But in terms of the people that are competing, which is actually quite far down the chain for the average equestrian, realistically, what we're really trying to deliver is safety at the competitions. We're really trying to deliver fairness at the competitions. So, with safety, you're getting into not just human safety of safe sport and these things that are being brought down from Sport Canada, but also horse welfare, fairness. You're getting into rules, tack, medication, all these sorts of things. So it becomes really important to deliver a safe, fair, inclusive competition environment. But we need to go further than the competition environment. in a typical sport, if you sign up for hockey or gymnastics, for example, you're dealing with a certified facility that's employing certified coaches, and you cannot go to a hockey game and watch your niece play hockey if you haven't done safe sport, for example. So you're dealing with a very well-defined playing field and very clear definition of who can be there and how to make sure that it's safe for kids. And so at EC, we don't have a facilities program yet. We're growing that. We have to create connection with the coaches and all these kinds of things, so that fairness, that safety is not just applied at the horse shows, but it's also applied all the way down through the equestrian experience.
Right. 2021's a tough time to be a governing body of anything. Sure. Whether you are, trying to lead your province or lead your country, or, and all over the world, leaders are facing a lot of criticism and a lot of backlash. Obviously in the United States, USEF is having their fair share of issues. EC is not overly popular in Canada amongst the regular equestrian as far as the public perception. And again, that's, there's multiple reasons for that. We don't need to get into all of the past reasons, but what is do you guys have meetings about how you're going to change the public perception, or how you're going to become more of what seems to be an advocate for your membership, or is that just a non-topic in the offices in Ottawa?
No, I would tell you that is a topic we talk about every single meeting, and are investing in it. We've hired consultants to help us with our communication in recent time, and we're engaging with media partners to be sure that we're spreading the message as well as we can. But I think it comes down to a couple different things. You really need to make sure that you're disseminating your message out well to the community, but you also need to make sure you're taking feedback in well from the community, and we need to be sure that we have the communication lines in place to really hear what the community is saying. And we need to have a good message to put out there. We need to be able to talk about our value. We need to grow the value. So a lot of equestrians don't realize Equestrian Canada deals with all of our medication, all of our transportation, all of our health concerns like the current EHV. All of that all goes through Equestrian Canada from the government. So we actually end up helping every horse in the country, but we don't talk about it well, and we don't grow what we're doing for them well. So we really need to be sure that we talk about what we do well, and we start to redesign everything from the ground up to create more value, and people really see that it's worthwhile to be part of the organization.
Canada is such a big country, and again, it's a very large organization that we're talking about. So how does Equestrian Canada, how do you get feedback from an exhibitor in northern British Columbia, for instance? Are there provincial representatives that help with that sort of thing, or how do you really know what your membership is doing, or what they're thinking, or what their concerns are, other than getting hate mail or a direct email to your offices? What's the and is there a communication system there?
Yeah, there definitely is. I would tell you that there's multiple. If you talk about how to connect with the organization, yes, the best way to connect is to email the appropriate operations person. But on our board of directors, I think we're 50% from Alberta and BC. We have another board member from Saskatchewan, so we're very geographically spread out. People can reach out to the board of directors. But you can also, the provinces are probably in weekly communication with EC. We also have discipline committees, people who sit on the discipline committees. So it really depends what concern there is. But we have people from really across the whole country, across all the disciplines, across all the interest groups. And depending on the concern, there's people advocating and the right people to connect with across all of those things.
And so for a member, let's say, Southern Saskatchewan that they're in, sure, or wherever it happens to be, or PEI, what's the best way if they're like, geez, I've got an idea that might be a good idea for EC, or I have a problem, or whatever it happens to be. What's the best way, other than say sending an email to the Ottawa offices, to go about it? Would it be to connect with their provincial organization, or how do they go about that?
It really depends on what the specific concern is. But our office is available all the time. If it's a provincial issue, then they deal with it provincially. If it's a nationally sanctioned show or a nationally designed program, they're welcome to reach out to the office. Mm-hmm. But it really is kind of figuring out where the best place to connect is for the specific concern. Not to give you not a specific answer, but it really depends what it is. Often it's going to be your discipline group. Often it could be the EC office, but it can also be your provincial. But all of them are available to connect with. In terms of ideas, I think that's one of the best things about EC. There's lots of people out there with tons of great ideas. Now, in the current environment, EC is operating on 50% of its usual income. We have to make sure that we come out of these changes with good impact, and that's why we're going through a whole redesign phase right now. But really, we have to make sure we do the basics well. So we want to take in all of those ideas, but we got to get back to the basics, and we got to do the basics really well to start with. And then we need all of those ideas. People can volunteer for committees to bring those ideas forward. They can speak to their volunteer committees. They can speak to the office. Any of those ways are available to them.
Let's go back. You touched earlier on the grassroots programs and how important that is. The perception is that, Equestrian Canada only cares about Eric Lamaze type of thing. And that's the only thing that's important. That's not the case, but that is some of the public perception that's out there. So how are you going to change that? And how are you, is there a plan for the grassroots programs to make them feel important and to develop and create those thousands of horse lovers that are out there?
Well, there's two different ways to come at that. I think for the existing horse lovers, we need to create products that have value to them. So what exactly are they getting from us, and what exactly is that costing, and that value proposition is really defined. Historically, EC has been a who's in and a who's out organization. That group was either part of EC or they weren't part of EC. And if they were part of EC, they came with their laundry list of things that they would like EC to do for them. And I've heard the saying a lot of times, we can't be everything to everybody. But I would change that to, well, we potentially could be something to everybody. If you call Bell Canada and you ask them if you can get your water from them, they say no. If you can't, well, can I get my cell phone from you? Yep, we do cell phones. Well, can I get my internet and my cable from you? Yep, we can do those things. We can make a package for you. Can I get my water? No, we don't do water. So EC needs to define what we do so people clearly understand what the value is and what they're getting for their money. And that value proposition is really defined, because we need to not only grow within the equestrian community. If we're only touching 90,000 out of 900,000 horse owners, there's a lot of people out there that we could be doing more for, or that we need to explain to them what we do for them so that they see that value. There's also an entire new generation that we'd like to get interested in horses, and across the board, not just in equestrian, but in all sports, they're in decline because the competition for participants is getting fierce. So EC is invested in a youth program that got piloted just before the COVID hit, where we can put a rookie riders program into local junior schools. After they've completed the school training, they get a ticket to ride, which will take them to a local certified coach. So we're really starting to try and grow the interest from a youth level and grow the value to the existing equestrian interested people. So you have to come at it from both sides. How do we create value in the existing community, and how do we grow the future community? And EC is investing in communication with the existing community. We're in the middle of a redesign to look at how our membership structure is, how our sanctioning structure is, what EC's business model is, so we can clearly define what we're offering to each group. We can clearly identify what they're looking for in each group and make sure the value is there. And we've started to develop all those programs to encourage youth to come into the sport, because the value add has to be everywhere. We want to have certified licensed coaches. Well, there's got to be value for that. So are we saving them money on something they can buy? Are we sending them customers? What is the value proposition? We would like it to make business sense to be a certified coach, that your business is better off to be a certified coach. Not to mention safer for the parents and the kids and all those that participate with a certified coach. But on top of that, from an event organizer point of view, there's got to be value, rather than being just a governing body. It's got to make business sense to run a sanctioned horse show. So whether it is, a member or a competition or a facility or a coach, EC needs to rethink its business model, rethink our membership structure, and rethink our sanctioning structure to be truly value oriented. And then we gotta be able to tell people about it. So those issues all roll into each other. But EC is in the middle of a 6-month redesign to do that.
You've touched on a couple big ones there, and we're going to get to that right now. Let's start off with the sanctions and the horse shows.
Sure.
Why should a horse show be EC sanctioned? What's the benefit to the horse show organizers to be sanctioned? And then the follow-up to that is, what is the benefit to the competitors for the show to be sanctioned?
From an organizer point of view, I think a lot of people underestimate the exposure legally to not being sanctioned. It's one thing if everything goes well, but if a rider falls off and there's an injury or there's a horse welfare issue, all of a sudden that falls back on the organizer because they don't have a complaints process. Their insurance is going to have a problem with that, and you have a real issue. But I think most importantly to the competitor, they know when they go to an EC sanctioned show that they're going to have breakaway cups, that they're going to have safe facilities, that they're competing in a safe environment, both for their child, which I think is critical, but also for their horse from a horse welfare point of view, that there's rules in place, there's mechanisms in place. Those officials can use the rules, can use the complaints process, can use any of the mechanisms that are built into a sanctioning process to really enforce a safe and a fair environment from a TAC point of view, from a medication point of view, all of these sorts of things. So from a competitor point of view, I think knowing that you or your child are competing in a safe environment is critical, competing in a fair environment. And I think that value has to grow, to be honest with you. From an organizer's point of view, it's a massive risk to not be sanctioned.
Let's talk about the officials at the horse shows, because that's been a very hot button topic over the past few months. So COVID has been, crushing for so many people and so many businesses, of course, and so many lives. We cannot forget that. But the officials, officials don't get paid a lot of money. They're doing it. They're giving back to the sport. They're doing it because they love the sport. It's not a lucrative position for what they're doing. Last year, a lot of officials couldn't work because there were very few horse shows, due to COVID. And up until this point, there haven't been, hardly any horse shows, if any, in Canada, at all in 2021 either. And we don't know how limited that's going to be moving forward. They might be opening up next month, or it might be several months away. Nobody knows the answer to that. So I want you to explain for people how, with the EC officials, how this works, because last year what happened was there were some shows that were not sanctioned that EC officials were working at, and then that caused an issue because you want the EC officials to only be working at sanctioned shows. So if you can touch on this topic, please.
I think there's a couple interesting points there. One is, COVID year was a strange anomaly for everybody. And you had a real disconnect between what different regional health bodies would allow and how they defined events, whether they were a competition or not a competition. And it created a lot of cracks in a system that we knew was already outdated. And that was the problem that we ran into in 2020. And everybody wanted the sport to get up and running again. So, everybody was trying to support organizers and participants in getting back to competition. However, EC officials have never been allowed to operate at unsanctioned shows. That's never been allowed. So EC's only restated that position this year. EC has further stated that with a waiver, they're welcome to work at PTSO sanctioned shows. PTSO sanctioned shows are supposed to be at a level below EC shows. So if they stay truly at the level where they're designed to be and where the rules facilitate them being, that's where EC wants to support that. Obviously, we got travel restrictions, all these sorts of things. So EC has no intention whatsoever of trying to limit competition or limit officials' ability to work. But we also need to make sure that we are maintaining the rules and the integrity of the sport, and that's how EC has restated their question.
So, I mean, I understand the point of having it set up the way that it is, but let me give you an example, because this was brought to me by many members, saying that, okay, they live in a town, there's going to be 65 horses at the horse show. It's it's a little bit in the remote area, to say the least, and it's lower level. Maybe the highest jumps will be 1 meter in height, type of thing. With not allowing EC officials to work at a show like that now means they're going to bring in a course designer and a judge that are of less experience, and it might be a more dangerous situation for those exhibitors, which already don't have much experience in that sort of environment. So how are you going to tackle that problem? Because we want to make it good for everybody, but are you wanting, say, that show that has 65 horses, those fees to pay the EC fees to have that now could make that 65 horses into 25 horses type of thing? So
I think it's
tackle that.
Oh, it's a perfect example you're talking about, because the level you're talking about at up to 1 meter and these level shows, they are truly PTSO level sanctioned shows in the current structure. And so that show can apply for a waiver from EC, and those officials can work there at a PTSO sanctioned show, just like they always have. None of the EC rules this year would inhibit the example that you're talking about, and we don't intend to. What we're trying to avoid is officials being put in a difficult position where they're enforcing rules at a show that they actually can't lean on EC for complaints or for resolution or anything like that, because it's not connected to EC and they are not insured at those shows. We do want to make sure that they can go to the grassroots shows, and if they're at the appropriate level and they're not trying to run a Grand Prix and pretend they're a local horse show, then they can apply for a waiver, and those officials can definitely be there, because we want it to be safe. We want to support sport taking place. We want to make sure that those officials are there because they're highly trained people, they're extremely passionate people, and it makes for a better experience when the rules are enforced and it's safe and all these sorts of things. So nothing EC is doing is intending to inhibit that. That's the short-term solution. The reality is COVID's been a weird thing for everybody. What EC has done is, in the fall, we announced to all of our stakeholders we're going to go into a 6-month redesign to really look at how sanctioning works, how membership works, what EC's business model is. And there's a task force working on this real time right now. You can see in the States with the Snaffle Bid Association and all that, there's different ways of doing sanctioning. So how do we make it make absolute business sense to run EC sanction? That from a membership point of view, there's not a barrier to entry. From a sanctioning point of view, there's not a barrier to entry. How do we do this better? Now, Snaffle Bid Association has been around for 30 years. They do it well, and the landscape is different in the US than it is in Canada. But that being said, how do we take our current sanctioning model, our current membership model, and make it world-class, make it modern? Because we've inherited it. There's been a lot of great people that have worked on it over the years, but it's outdated. And people aren't seeing the value, whether that's a participant or whether that's an organizer or it's a coach. And we have to fundamentally look at it. So if we were to turn around and say, we can do this in 2 weeks, here's the answer, I think we'd be very naive. So to say that we're going to put together a panel, a task force that's working on it right now, it's going out to consultation with the entire community with the goal of bringing it to the board for recommendations in August to be passed at the AGM in September, as it should be appropriately. I think giving ourselves 6 months and giving ourselves the expertise to really look at it is the appropriate move. The sport has been in decline for over a decade. We did a competition review where we put together 540,000 results from EC's records, from PTSO records, from discipline records, from FEI, from the USEF, to be able to map where all our participants are coming from. We can map them by age, by geography, by discipline across the entire country. And this is just one of the things that EC's been doing to start to create those foundational pieces, that foundational knowledge to say, okay, this is what we've inherited. There's no blame or anything like that, but it's clearly not working. What are we going to do about it? And we have to come together as a community to figure out what we're going to do about it. It's clear it's not working. And so now we have to go forward. And the blame game is lost on us because we have to go forward if we want to, save our sport.
For our live viewers, if you have a question, please send them in. And we do have a question here from Suzanne Cullen, which we're going to put up, which is talking somewhat on the officials here. And that is this: what are you going to do to make stewards have enough power and not be subject to pressure from horse show management to turn a blind eye? So just to preface this before you answer this question, one of the challenges here is the stewards are hired by the horse show management. They're not assigned by EC or any governing body. They're actually hired there. So, there can be a bit of a conflict of interest, and stewards have a very difficult job. And most of them do a fantastic job with what they do. There's no question about that. But there are some concerns of horse abuse or things like that happen in the warm-up rings or happen in the lunging rings, and that sort of happen in the stabling area, that not enough is being done. So I'm not prefacing that question because it's a big topic, of course. So how would you answer Suzanne's question?
I think Suzanne's got a great question. I think that there's many different pieces that we're working on to start to empower the stewards more, because we've got a fantastic group of stewards. First of all, from an official's point of view, there's been an official shortage for decades, and this has been coming, and it's not just in Canada, it's across the world in equestrian. So we've got a big investment planned on how to grow our officials, and that's something that's been coming for some time, obviously slowed down by COVID, but first of all, we need to grow those officials. We're also putting in all of the safe sport protocols that Sport Canada has dictated, so that they have some real specific things to fall back on. But as we look at sanctioning, we need to look at the officials also. You're absolutely right. There's a conflict of interest between, getting rehired potentially and what the employer wants. So we need to look at how we do that. Other sports do it different ways. I don't pretend to know what our answer will be. That's why we have a task force working on it. But some sports, the officials are selected by the governing body and sent there, so they truly work for the governing body. But we have to have a situation where the stewards are empowered to protect horse welfare. If you look at the FEI, one of the biggest concerns is our social license to continue with our sport. So equine welfare is absolutely critical. If you look at Sport Canada and what they're trying to do with safe sport, protecting the athlete is absolutely critical. It's only going to become more prevalent in our sport. And so those sorts of things are worked on in separate different projects, but they're all aware of each other to make sure those stewards are in a position to protect the horses and protect the athletes and to be able to do what their job is. And we have got some great stewards, so that's important.
A follow-up from me on this is that we really need to have all officials being designated by the governing body and not being hired by the horse shows. I think it's been done. It's just always been done that way. I don't know that. I know there's a lot of logistical issues with that. I know it's not an easy solution, but to help to create credibility for the sport, that really, and I've been advocating that for the last 10 years type of thing. So I do hope that will happen. So I want to get to one more thing here before we get to some more viewer questions, and that is coaching certification. So, this actually rolled out in 2020, and there was kind of a 5-year plan for the coaching certification through Equestrian Canada. And then, of course, the pandemic happened, so boom, that went away. But if you could just briefly go into now what Equestrian Canada is hoping to accomplish with the coaching certification program in Canada and what this is going to mean for the individuals involved.
Yeah, so we're still looking to get to coach certification over a 5-year plan. And we have the interim step of doing coach licensing. And this was quite a clever way of letting people ease into the certification process. If we had to certify all of the coaches in a short period of time, that would obviously create a backlog. And we've got a lot of very successful people that run great businesses that are operating just fine without certification. However, if we truly want to move forward as a sport, if we want to deliver learn to ride, if we want to deliver safe sport, if we want to protect our coaches from all these things and educate them so that they know how to behave appropriately. This has happened in many other sports. Boy Scouts went through this, Girl Guides went through this years and years and years ago. But this is coming in our sport, and the best way to protect our coaches is to educate them and to make sure that we support them and they're aware of the rules and all these kinds of things. So coach certification comes from a lot of different directions. If we want to do learn to ride, if we want to create a safe environment, if we want to do all of these things, we need to have contact with the coaches, and we can't set them up to fail that they don't know about these things. So we're still moving towards coach certification, but we're starting with coach licensing, and it's designed to be as low a barrier to entry as possible. I'm not sure how a coach would explain to a parent that they don't want a background check, or they don't want to know what the safe sport rules are, or they don't want to take a 30-minute ethics course online, or they don't want to do first aid to know what happens if a kid falls off and has a concussion. And those are the main criteria for coach licensing. And actually with COVID, it's even easier. You can do all those courses online, including the first aid right now. So basically for one afternoon sitting at home, you can be sure that you're better prepared if there's an accident, and you know what the rules are for safe sport, and the parents know that they're sending their kid into a safe environment. So we need to professionalize our sport. It's not a question of if, we have to. And then we're going to need a facilities program to make sure that we're connecting all these people. Now there needs to be the value add, like we talked about before, that we're sending people customers because of this, and we're growing the participation through all of the other programs, and that's getting funneled to all of our certified coaches. But the reality is, from a legal point of view, from an ethics point of view, all these different things, coach certification should add value in the end when it's done correctly, and it really should protect the coach, and it should give confidence. We have to realize that to any parent who's not been a horse person, taking their kid to a barn is a scary proposition with a pony or a horse. And they need to know that they're going into a safe environment if we want our sport to grow. And that's why coach certification becomes critical. It's very difficult to implement and to start to regulate an unregulated part of the industry. But it's been done intentionally, phased over 5 years. Even the insurance, there was pushback about including the insurance. We now have the numbers that over 90% of the coaches would have saved money if we'd gone with the global insurance. Every single facility who's applied would have saved money if we'd have gone with the insurance included. So we're trying to build programs that have a value add, where we see that there's a lack of buy-in. We're adjusting, but we have to go this direction. We have to professionalize it.
So coach licensing, I think that's a no-brainer.
Sure.
I've heard people say, well, I don't want to get a police check. Well, if that's the case, that's a bit of a red flag. So I think coach licensing, that's a gimme, and everybody has to do that. The certification, just a simple question. How is Ian Miller going to become a certified Canadian coach? Does he have to get tested and be evaluated to be a certified Canadian coach, or are you grandfathering people like him in?
Well, I'm happy to say that Ian Miller is already a certified coach, so I don't have to answer that question too difficultly. But yes, I think we have to. There's a difference between grandfathering and challenging at a level. We need to make sure we are appreciative of the people who've been doing this for years. We also need to be appreciative of the people who have gone through the certification program already. So we have to find a balance in that. But there's not many professional industries where you don't have to do some continued learning, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a doctor. And doing this over a 4-year period, one afternoon course a year, and you're pretty much going to be there in 4 years. So whether you're getting grandfathered in, or you're doing the courses, or whatever you're trying to do, I think it's not an easy ask, but it's a reasonable ask for the direction that we want to go with the sport, and what we hope that we will offer the people in return. But it's a complex situation because some people have done it. They've spent a lot of money doing it and becoming certified in the past. You can't be unrespectful of that commitment and that cost. At the same time, you got people who've been running business for years and they've been doing it successfully. So there's no perfect answer.
Right.
what there needs to be is a direction. The direction needs to be to grow the sport and to professionalize the sport, and that's where we're trying to go. And you got to try and find the best path to do that for people involved.
Excellent. That's a great answer. We're going to take a 20-second timeout to hear from our sponsor, Equishopper.com, and then we're going to be back on the other side with your questions for the president of EC, Chris Sorensen. Welcome back to the Jay Duke Show on Horse Network. I'm here with the president of Equestrian Canada, Chris Sorensen, and he's been fantastic and insightful and has a very challenging job in front of him. Definitely, I think he's up for the task. I've, over the past few weeks, taken many questions from fans and viewers of the show to ask to Equestrian Canada, and I really appreciate all of the feedback. We're going to get up some of those questions now up on the board for you. And if you're watching the show live and have a question, please feel free to add to it. Carly's going to put up the questions on the board for us, and we're going to have those. I'm going to read those questions actually, and then she's going to type them up for us. So I'm going to go to that. So Chris, how many queries do you get from, say, membership in a week from your membership, as far as questions that are coming into Equestrian Canada, as far as helping the organization to make the sport better? Like, would you have a number? Do you get 10, 100, 1,000? How much feedback are you getting from your members?
I think I'd be lying if I had an exact number for you, but the entire staff gets thousands of questions or comments a week, especially with entries and sanctioning and all these sorts of things. It's often been a complaint that EC is hard to get a hold of, but I think one thing people don't realize is EC functions with about 40% of our revenue spent on staff. Most national sporting organizations are at 60-70% spent on staff. So we're massively understaffed. We got to make that adjustment. I can tell you our staff work incredibly hard and are incredibly dedicated. But they are dealing with thousands of inquiries a week. Right.
Well, I'm sure they are. So let's start with this question here. And Carly, you don't have to type this one up. This is a big one. It's a long one. Does EC have anyone communicating directly with federal and provincial health offices advocating for return to equestrian sport in Canada? Is there leadership from the top in this regard? Currently, it seems they are relying on individual organizations to advocate for themselves. For example, the Alberta High School Rodeo Associations have been successful in advocating and getting rodeos to happen here in Alberta. What's happening with that?
Well, I guess that's a multi-part answer. That is EC advocating for this? Yes, absolutely. They're advocating for sport to open. We've been doing this for some time. Yves Hamelin, when he was part of the organization, was lobbying Sport Canada, which ended up in $34.5 million to NSOs, $32.5 million to PTSOs. All this lobbying is about what the economic impact was going to be on sport and making sure that the NSOs and the PTSOs were getting the support they needed to continue. EC also led the advocacy to Ag Canada to make sure we were supporting a lot of riding schools in the provinces that chose to engage with us. They got a lot of money. Ontario got $3 million for riding school horses, which was just fantastic. But to talk about the health bodies are typically regional or provincial, or even down to a regional level. So EC has created protocols for horse shows, protocols to enable the provinces. They were developed with provinces to be able to give horse shows, to show that they have the right level of protocols to have an event. So we're building the foundational documents to make sure that they have that to support their applications. So EC does advocate at the highest level, but in the end, a lot of the events come down to a local or regional level final decision from a health health perspective. And so we support those organizations with the backup stuff to advocate. But in the end, often it's our support and their on the ground advocacy that comes to the end decision. I have been impressed with Rodeo, though. They have been very good.
Yeah, Rodeo does do a good job.
They do a great job.
Yeah. You need to get some of the PBR people from the Professional Bull Riding Association as far as promoting
there you go.
show jumping as well, because they do such a great job. Here's another question we have. If we are looking at a second year without EC sanctioned shows, which we're definitely at part of a year, no question already, will a refund of our gold memberships or CET memberships be offered? If not, how will the member fees from 2020 and 2021 be allocated?
Great question. Well, I think the 2 years are a little bit differently. In 2020, obviously, a lot of people had signed up, and then all of a sudden COVID hit us. So for 2020, there was a 25% discount that was offered for those that had made no use of their membership. 2021, what we've done is we've waived all late fees, both for organizations and for individual members, to try and give people the most amount of flexibility this year, knowing that COVID is part of the environment. In terms of how the dollars are allocated that EC has brought in, obviously EC is a not-for-profit organization, so any dollar that comes in is reinvested in the sport, and we're trying to reinvest in programs, and specifically our redesign this year, to really make sure that we come out of this COVID crisis seeing all of the trends that actually were pre-existing but have been accelerated by COVID, and investing in coming out of this as a stronger organization. So every dollar is invested in rule amendments, program amendments, redesign, all of the protocols that are needed to roll out safe sport. EC is invested in an eCampus, an online platform that was released this fall, which allows us to deliver safe sport at a fraction of the cost that was originally proposed. It allows us to give courses to officials. We're building that online inventory of courses so that officials can get certified more cost effectively and cognizant of our geographic reality. Same with coach certification. They're going to be able to do a lot of this online that they need to move towards certification. So all of that money is invested in programs and really coming out of this crisis a lot stronger as an organization.
Super. Is there any financial support being offered to EC officials who rely on horse show employment as their main source of income?
Well, EC does not directly employ the officials, so that would go to all of the government programs and making sure that they can apply for all those. EC has provided information to how to apply for some of those programs and support people in applying for those programs and make them aware of them. But in the end, all of the employment programs came from the federal government.
Right. Yeah, and of course that makes sense. This next one we have touched on, but I can ask it again, and you can just kind of rehash it. Will a new memorandum of agreement be on the table for discussion to allow EC officials to work at shows sanctioned at the provincial level? So you did talk about that earlier, but if you could just answer that question again here for the viewers who missed that.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's important to identify that they're two separate parts. One, EC officials is not directly tied to our MOA with the provinces. And I think what is important to know is that, the MOA was before that an MOU, and there's a lot of history in those agreements. EC, from a board perspective, definitely wants to be in an agreement with our provinces and wants to make sure that we have a clear understanding of roles and responsibilities, and we've got accountability on both sides. Mm-hmm. The history of it is when we came in as board members, we had a meeting with the provinces in 2018, and they were very organized, and they came forward with the direction that we needed to go, some of the programs like coaching and learn to ride and these sorts of things. And they had scoped out what they thought the cost and the timeline of that would be. So EC was very, very interested in this, and we bought into this. But all these programs were designed before we'd hired the expertise to do it. So the reality of the timelines and the cost of doing this was much bigger than anticipated. EC has committed to these because they've come into all of our strategic planning, and we're moving in that direction. But when you dove into, okay, how do we deliver coach certification, for example, we didn't have the technology. We didn't have the connection with the coaches. we didn't have the scalability to deliver these things. So EC has started from the bottom, and we've really designed an e-campus. We've designed a coaching program. We're moving towards all of the building blocks that unfortunately weren't there previously. But again, it's not about blame. It's about how do we move forward. So do we want to have an agreement with provinces? Yeah, absolutely. We're best when we're together. We're strongest when we have got strong national programs that they're delivering provincially. Mm-hmm. The past MOA was not working. It was not functional, and we need to move towards a different agreement. But whether we want that partnership and whether we want an agreement is absolutely critical that we move forward in that way. And EC has to make the tough decisions that it takes to change course on where we've been going and really become, a world-leading organization with great programs and great value add. And that value add extends to the provinces also. What does EC do to make it really valuable for them to be part of our stakeholder group? So we can't do that unless we really fundamentally make changes. That's why we've asked them all to be part of the redesign, and they're all consulted on that if they choose to engage with the organization. So we're moving forward, but it takes a lot of hard decisions. It's about getting buy-in. And I think one thing that's really important to be aware of is that most of the pushback comes internally. We're not getting pushback from outside of our organization or outside of our sport. It's creating that internal buy-in. There's a lot of people that have been involved for a lot of years. They've gotten frustrated. They haven't seen it go in the direction they want, or they don't want it to change. But we've got to move forward because what we've been doing clearly isn't working. Everybody's frustrated. It's in decline. And we need to make the tough decisions to go forward and create value for everybody involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And, we received several questions, and this, of course, has to do with COVID as far as, how can EC help junior riders achieve their goals to compete nationally, when, they were unable to compete, say, last year and then even this year is a possibility of not being able to compete. I don't know that if there's anything that really can be done about that except changing the age requirements for some of these competitions, which is just unfortunately not feasible. But there is an overlying feeling that people, from the West kind of get a little, that the focus, again, like I mentioned earlier, about everything's about Eric Lamaze, which it's not, but that's the perception, or everything is about competing at the Royal Winter Fair as opposed to any other horse show. How are you going to deal with that? Have you looked at the suggestion of, say, creating a national championship in the East and in the West of Canada? I mean, Canada is a huge country, and travel is across the country. I mean, it's $2,500 to ship a horse one way from, Alberta to Ontario, and that's only half the country, never mind the whole thing. So have you looked at possibly, because Canada's so big, maybe dividing it up a little bit to create these championships and to help the members that way and have more involvement?
I'll take that question in two parts. The junior question is very difficult. We put together a working group on it last year to look at solutions, but it becomes very difficult because if you extend the junior year, then you affect the age group underneath them potentially unfairly, and so there's to be honest, no good solution to it. The U.S. has looked at it also. I personally think that we really need to build an athlete pathway where there's more milestones, whether you've got juniors and then young riders and these sorts of things. We have the CET, which goes to 21. We have young riders for jumpers, things like this. But there's no great solution to the junior year question, is the truth of it. In terms of Canada's diversity geographically, I mean, it's been a problem for years. I think it's definitely always liked to go to the Royal. I always really wanted to go to the Masters also. So it is a logistical challenge, but this issue was identified before COVID hit and was just exacerbated by COVID. In terms of having a national championships on the East and then one on the West, and it's not truly a national championships. But what we do need to build is a system where we are really allowing opportunity in every region, and we're making a balanced approach to how we get to a national champion, whether that is through regional championships and then to a national championships and all those kinds of things. But this gets back to our sanctioning question and back to our redesign. And our system was completely outdated and it needs a complete rework, which is why we set aside 6 months to do it. And we've engaged all the right expertise, but I couldn't agree more. It doesn't work the way it is. Canada's geography is not going to change. And we need to look at it so that everybody feels like they're connected to the sport at the level that they want to be connected to, and they have the access no matter where they are. But that is a problem that is not solved in a short conversation, and that's why we didn't position it that way. And I don't think it's a question that's going to be solved at the end of 6 months, but I think we can create a framework that allows a solution to come forward, and then we're going to turn it over to each discipline to really look at it and say, okay, how do we create growth and opportunity in every area? There is no question what we were doing was not working, and that's what a lot of these things come down to. So the question is, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to sit here and do what we've always done? Or are we going to take the hard decisions and really look in the mirror and say, okay, how can we fundamentally do this different? How can we do this world class? And those are hard things to get people to look at and hard to get buy-in for, but EC wants to lead and be a true national organization, and you got to look those hard questions in the eye.
Yeah, you do. It's a tough one. And yeah, hopefully our geography is not changing as far as that goes. One of our live viewers has sent in a question, Valeria Riza, and that question goes back to the coaching certification we were talking about earlier. Can foreign coaches participate in the coaching certification program?
Great question. I'm not completely aware of all of the exact details, but I know that we are continuing to grow other certification internationally that we have that we accept as certified. I can tell you it's challenging internationally. I'm currently in the Netherlands. I'm trying to get a background check in 4 different countries with COVID. So the logistics are difficult, but directionally, we want to make sure that anybody that is in Canada operating as a coach has the ability to get certified. So certainly when you make these big programs, to think that you're going to get it 100% right on day one is a complete fallacy. So certain things have been flagged. I know foreign coaches were one of them. And as we see those things come up, we're looking to address them, because the reality is we want to be inclusive. So I'm not sure of the exact answer to that, but I know directionally we definitely want to be able to have any coach in Canada that's operating to be sure that they're safe and certified.
COVID's been so hard on so many people. And, as we talked about earlier, I want to talk about the Braiders at the horse shows. And a question here from a viewer. Why are Braiders not being allowed to work at the Canadian horse shows? Since they work at night in isolation, typically they pose very little threat of spreading COVID, certainly less than those workers who do come in contact with others during the day. And then they go on to, they're feeling that they're being singled out. And in the US, they have found a way to make Braiders available to, on the horse shows. What is EC's take on that? So much of with COVID is about inconsistencies from the health organizations and that. But when we talk about the Braiders, they're just trying to make a living, and
sure.
For most of that's their full-time job. That's what they do. So what's EC going to do about that, or why are they being singled out?
Well, I think I love hearing these questions, because it's great to clear some of these things up. So a couple points there. One is the USCF actually originally did not allow Braiders and then amended their rules. EC has provided guidelines to the horse shows. They're not rules, they're guidelines. And it's up to the horse show's decision whether they allow Braiders or not. EC has never put forward a rule to not allow Braiders, simply guidelines. Now, if you look at the rules and the regulations across the world, almost everything is bubbles and groups and this and that. And Braiders do move between different barn aisles and different stables and all of that. So that is probably one of the concerns that the horse show management is looking at. And that is consistent with almost all measures, even though measures across the world vary. But, our biggest goal is to get the sport up and running again. And we need to put forward guidelines that are going to make local health authorities want to allow horse shows. So that's why that's included in the guidelines. But like I said, it's not a rule that EC has ever put forward or enforced, and it's completely up to the horse show discretion and making sure that they meet their local health officials' needs.
Right. Chris, you've been amazing. A lot of tough questions for you. This is definitely what we call the hot seat, and on a live show, and there's really tough ones. And what I liked about it was that you really did your very best to give us solutions and potential answers moving forward. You didn't avoid the questions like a lot of people tend to do when it comes to these sort of things. So I really appreciate that. I know that the thousands and thousands of viewers for the show are going to really appreciate that as well. I hope to get you back on soon. And, when some of these programs are in place, maybe we'll talk again in 6 months or 12 months type of thing, and see how these thoughts and ideas are progressing. And I'm sure there'll be new problems and there are new solutions to moving forward. And really appreciate your time and coming on the show.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. It's quite nice to be able to answer some questions and get the information out there. But I think you'll see a lot of great things come out from EC in the next year. It's a little bit like an iceberg. There's been a ton of work going on, but we need to make sure it's all polished before it is released. But we are really looking to come out of this crisis a better organization with true value added at all levels for everybody. And that takes a lot of guts, and it takes a lot of difficult decisions, and takes creating buy-in and communicating with people well. So happy to do it.
Thank you so much. Next week on the Jay Duke Show on Horse Network, American star Bliss Hears is coming on the show. She's made the short list for Tokyo. She's an up-and-coming star and just a fantastic character, and cannot wait to have her on. Thank you so much to Equishopper for your support. Please check out equishopper.com for all of your horse needs. They really are a wonderful site with a wonderful set of everything you could ever need. You'll spend hours and hours on their website. It's really, really cool. Thank you to Horse Network and Carly Sparks for producing the show and making this all happen. Ride safely, and as always, respect the horse.